Hello, Bulldog fans, and welcome back to another edition of Curtin Call, an inside look into the world of coaching. Very excited for today's guest. Today's guest is a good friend of mine. I have known this guest for a long time. I won't go into how many years we've known each other. However, today's guest is a man who is a three-sport coach here at Riverside Brookfield and coaching football, wrestling, and track were his primary sports, and I believe he spent a little time coaching basketball as well, which we'll save for another time to discuss. But our guest today is Duane Buturusis, and Duane is currently the athletic director at Nazareth Academy. Thanks for coming on the show, Coach.
Thanks, Brendan.
It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm glad, very happy to be back.
Absolutely. So, Coach, as I had mentioned before, you've coached football here at Riverside Brookfield. You're a wrestling coach. You're a track coach. Can you talk a little bit about how it is, how you got into this profession, if there is somebody that kind of maybe struck a chord with you in terms of mentoring you and getting into coaching?
Well, being a three-sport athlete in high school obviously helps because your love of sport generally keeps you involved in some way. But I think if I reflect back, and I'm going to date myself a little bit, but I was a sophomore in college and I had just moved back into the area, and my high school football coach invited me to come and help him start the boys lacrosse program at Oak Park. So, and that was back in 1968.
Wow. So
anyway, I thought, well, that's a great opportunity. I hadn't really given too much thought about my future at that point. Still, you're a college student. You're struggling a little bit to try to create an identity, and he gave me an opportunity, and we spent the first year putting that program together, and then I got an invitation back the second year, and then the third year. So by the time I got through with college, I'd had an opportunity to coach 3 years of lacrosse and 2 years of wrestling at Oak Park, which naturally led myself into the profession.
Sure, okay.
So,
who would have thought that you'd be coaching lacrosse again?
Yes, absolutely.
As a fill-in for a startup program, no doubt about it. Coach, when I mentioned the words of the pit, I know a lot of former Bulldogs, a lot of older Bulldogs reminisce about the weight room that we had here.
Right.
And it wasn't pretty, but it was multifunctional, and I think it really had a tremendous impact on a lot of Bulldogs, futures and moving on to the next level and a place where they could go to develop their bodies. And obviously we're talking about the weight room, and although it's changed, can you touch on a little bit some of the things that you took into account for implementing the weightlifting program here at Riverside Brookfield, as well as that space in general?
Well, in the mid to late 70s, strength training and conditioning didn't really exist. It was a beginnings we saw at the college level. And the Eastern Europeans at that point were far surpassed anything that we were here doing in the United States. And I was lucky enough to work with a couple of individuals through track initially who got me motivated to bring some of those strategies back to the high school. And one thing led to another. We were able to put together a program that we called it the program, actually, and got kids interested. And these young men, these young women that helped did some pretty dynamic things. We connected with our community. We did fitness center. We had actually an operating fitness center similar to what you see nowadays with X Sport and Life Fitness and everything else, only on a very small community scale. The gentleman that really made this happen was Dr. William Hayner. Doc lived right over here in town.
Okay.
And at that time he was connected with Rush Medical Center. Doc did pass away recently. And but that gentleman helped get the resources necessary for us to put that together, and we were off and running.
Got it. Absolutely. I know it's holds a special place in the hearts of many past Bulldogs.
Absolutely.
No question about it. And to my recollection, you were the coach that was running the ship, so to speak, down there. So you throw in football, wrestling, track, and then throw in the hours down in the weightlifting room. This is something that is unheard of nowadays for most coaches, most young coaches that are coming through. Just as we have athletes that specialize in individual sports, now we have some coaches that, couldn't even comprehend coaching
Right.
3 sports, let alone also monitoring the weight room. What changes have you seen, in the world of coaching? Again, I know your career has spanned many years, but what do you think are some of the most significant changes you've seen?
Most significant technology. Mm-hmm. Everything that we're doing nowadays is tied into technology in some way. Obviously, just sitting in this room right now, this room is full of technology, and the enhancements that it brings to your educational system as well as to your coaching and athletic environment. We can't do anything anymore without technology, and I'm not talking about just the phones. I'm talking about Huddle, and video analysis.
Sure, software.
I mean, back in that day, it was not, a football coach would sit down in front of a Super 8mm projector and sit and watch film.
Sure.
Nowadays, we just turn on the internet and we have access to everything. Technology has had the most significant impact on our profession. Absolutely.
That's a great point, Coach. I should also add that Coach Buturusis was also a PE instructor here at Riverside Brookfield, and I believe somewhere throughout your course you also were a computer teacher, if you will, a software teacher.
Yes, I got started in technology, and I actually got to teach the first classes here at Riverside Brookfield to our teachers on how to use technology. We were teaching teachers how to implement those strategies in the classroom that they could then take to their students and help them be better students and learn more efficiently. And I also did some teaching for the University of Illinois, and then I used that to springboard into athletics and other educational environments.
No question. Exciting. Who would have thought it, right?
Absolutely.
Coach, I'll tell you what, nobody has had more of an impact on me, in the time we got to work with each other, and just how important and what the word student-centered means. Because for a man that's been around this line of work for as long as you have, sometimes people lose sight of what's important and why they got into this line of work. And I always felt like you were one that always put the student first, and I know that was how you comported yourself when you first got into this industry, and that's still how you do it. So, I just want to take a minute and thank you for all the wisdom that you imparted on me. We're going to take a break for a moment. Please stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Curtin Call. Welcome back to Curtin Call. I'm Brendan Curtin, and today's guest is Mr. Duane Buturusis, former Riverside Brookfield coach and instructor, current Nazareth Academy athletic director. Coach, you've been in all these different positions of leadership throughout the course of your career. Could you talk a little bit about what it is you look for in a candidate, whether you're looking for a freshman soccer coach or your next sport of your next, a major sport, if you will? What are some of the characteristics that you look for when identifying candidates?
Absolutely. First of all, I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to move, call it up the ladder over time. At Riverside Brookfield, I was a teacher, a coach, a department chair, acted as a head coach for a short time in track. When I left here and joined the staff at Downers North, continued my profession as a department leader. Became a dean, an assistant athletic director, and associate principal, and then I had the opportunity to retire about 9 years ago. I have had many opportunities to meet with people. As an associate principal, I also got to step out of my comfort zone and work in the academic areas. And so I wasn't just hiring physical education teachers anymore, I was hiring science teachers, social studies teachers, and so on. And I was also very involved with students in other arenas. To identify quality instructors, that's a tough question, and it's a great question. I think the one thing that we look for the most, if you can find that person who you know is dedicated and committed and professional, that's a winner. That's automatic. And sometimes that doesn't come out in the interview. And sometimes, especially if you're hiring new people, they haven't had a chance to show this.
Sure, to prove themselves.
Right.
Sure.
But one person that caught my attention a few years ago, we were hiring a science teacher, and he wasn't, his academic performance in high school was okay. We were looking for a really outstanding teacher. But in his credentials, his profile, in every team and every activity he had been involved, he had always been a leader. He had been a captain. He wasn't just he wasn't the most talented player on the team, but he had a track record of being a leader.
Sure.
So when we got down to crunch time, and we said, and the person I was interviewing with, we asked him, so why weren't your grades as good as as you show yourself? And his comment was, I went to school to play football, and I became a teacher. I became interested in education, and that said it all. You could tell right then and there that he was translating those skills that he had learned as a young boy to being an adult.
Sure.
And I think that's what we try to look for.
No question.
I mean, those are the same qualities, Brendan, that you showed.
I can certainly relate to that story, no doubt about it.
Yes.
So, dedication, leadership qualities certainly are some of the traits, the characteristics that set apart, great coaches from average coaches. And I always feel that, if you can teach, you can coach, and if you can coach, you can teach.
Right.
They're one of the same. You did mention, Coach, the level of dedication required to really excel in this arena. Talk about a little bit, again, going back to, you're a 3-sport coach, spending time in the weight room, that support system at home. There's always a woman behind the man that is really paying the price.
A person behind a person.
Sure, absolutely.
A person that's right.
No question.
You've got to have a loving, understanding family. There's no question. And it's not uncommon that families evolve into new families because the kids grew up following mom or dad around, and that becomes part of their life, their routine. But you're right. The amount of time and energy you put in is substantial, and you've got to have someone that will tolerate that. And sometimes it gets tough, but especially when you're trying to get your master's and do those other things.
Absolutely.
So,
yep.
But having that person that support system is essential.
Takes a special person to be a coach's wife.
Right.
No question about it. We think we know, but I'm sure that they would tell us that we have no idea. Coach, if you wouldn't mind, just talk a little bit about, again, your career has spanned so many years, and I say that respectfully. Talk a little bit about some of the challenges maybe that coaches faced when you first entered the arena of coaching, and what challenges you may see, some of the greatest challenges coaches nowadays see.
Well, I think, again, that truly special person is always looking for ways to get better. And it isn't just winning. It's about having your kids or your teachers or your organization perform at its highest level. And you should be constantly reviewing how to make them better. And what things can you do to help them make them better? That topic we got going back to strength training and conditioning. One of the reasons why we got so heavily involved in strength training and conditioning was performance. How that's a way of helping people perform better. And there's the physiological effects, and then of course the other piece is the psychological. The psychological is a lot tougher because that's a special area that most people aren't prepared to handle.
Sure.
But we want the good ones really keep searching. How can we get better? How can we do? And the minute something happens, we're immediately asking ourselves, okay, so what's next?
Absolutely. Always striving to be better.
Right.
Improving, no question. Coach, when I think about you as the football coach, I always think of you as a defensive coach. I know you spend some time on the offensive side of the ball in the trenches. Is it fair to say that you spent most of your time working with O-line and D-line?
Yes.
Okay. I know you were instrumental in Tom Baugh's development, former Bulldog that went on to play at Southern Illinois and with the Kansas City Chiefs. Outside of Mr. Baugh, if I asked you to name me 3 names of football players that would be at or near the top of your list, What names come to mind
From
as
Riverside
far as
Brookfield.
linemen?
From Riverside Brookfield. Pete Baldacci comes to mind. Rich Janikakis comes to mind. Jerry Ryan. You know,
Sure.
I mean, that's from one extreme to another.
Right.
Vince Hanahan. I mean, these are young men who were not as big, but they gave you everything, regardless of their size, and that's all you could ask for. So very fortunate here. We always had really good big linemen, but we had a lot of other players who weren't as big, who were just as good and had as much heart, maybe even more.
Sure. No question.
42 years, by the way.
42 years.
42 years, but that's who's counting, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, 42 years, you've touched a lot of lives. I'm sure. I know you touched mine, and you've touched my brothers. And, you know, I hope you stick with it and you stay involved in athletics, because I know, you know, you're a special person. You're a special coach, and I know Nazareth is lucky to have you.
Great.
Coach, I appreciate you coming on the show. You're always welcome to come back and join us anytime, and we wish you the best of luck moving forward.
Brendan, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for Curtin Call. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.